It is 3 minutes after 12, and it is always with a heavy heart that I redirect your attention back to the Gaza Strip, where the continuing carnage demands our attention. Not unlike the war in Ukraine, it is not something you can talk about every single day, but there are days when you have to sort of gird yourself to talk about it, because innocents are dying on an unprecedented scale in Gaza. And I'm afraid that we remain essentially, as a country, an ally of the people responsible for the carnage, as indeed do America. We're now in a really weird, the United States of America. We're now in a really weird space where Joe Biden has gone further than any other president. Indeed, he's gone so far that a spokesman for the Israeli government has described him as being outside the diplomatic norms of every right-thinking country, despite the fact that Biden probably remains more sympathetic to Israel than almost any other country on the planet, including, of course, this one. Whether you're looking at comments made by the Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, or the Shadow Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. So, I mean, the sense of Israel now being completely detached from the rest of the world and completely detached from observable reality has become almost irresistible, because where Biden has gone latterly is in many ways extraordinary. Well, again, it's extraordinary, but at the same time, utterly unsurprising, because it's so obviously true. This has been a really frustrating thing about covering this objectively, has been the fact that Joe Biden will be saying things, or Chuck Schumer will be saying things that speak to the international consensus that Israel has embarked upon an absolutely heinous campaign in Gaza. And they are edging ever closer to that consensus. Whether or not it includes war crimes or genocide becomes more and more debatable, if you like, as the story continues to unfold. But they've been doing it while simultaneously providing more support to Benjamin Netanyahu's regime than any other country on the planet. It's as if they've sort of tried to both support and disapprove of what Netanyahu has been doing. But the new bit, and it's a mark, I think, of how the news cycle works more than anything else, the new bit is significant and somewhat underreported because of the way that the news cycle works. But President Biden has said that Benjamin Netanyahu is now prolonging the war in Gaza for his own purposes. I just want you to stop and think about that for a minute. The reason why the death toll of 36,470 continues to rise has nothing to do with hostages, has nothing to do with Hamas, and it has everything to do with Benjamin Netanyahu's personal interests, his own purposes. This is an interview that he gave to Time magazine a few days before he went public with his own proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza. Tensions between the US and Israel are high. As evidenced by those ludicrous comments from the spokesman for the Israeli government, who describes Biden as being outside, or Biden's comments as being outside the diplomatic norms of every right-thinking country. I'd be amazed if there is a right-thinking country on the planet that doesn't agree entirely with Joe Biden's analysis in this case. And as the Telegraph reports this morning, it will be seen as another sign. The Times reports this morning that Biden is running out of patience with Netanyahu and with diplomatic strategies to end the war. So, how do you want to do this one today? I don't think anybody can really disagree with Biden's analysis. I don't know where the line was, and I sometimes think that it was a crass question to ask, but I still don't think there was a better one of how much will be too much. So in the immediate aftermath of the October the 7th attack on Israel, the question was about what would a proportionate response be and what would be a disproportionate response. It became clear incredibly quickly that Netanyahu's response was going to be incredibly disproportionate if you see a Palestinian life as being equal to an Israeli life. If you don't see a Palestinian life as being equal to an Israeli life, then you probably think the response hasn't even become disproportionate yet. but for everybody else, it clearly is. And then, as the death toll grew, the question of when the number would become too high, when it would become too much, went through a curious journey, didn't it, of being a sort of brilliant question, or almost a gotcha question: how much is too much? Because you can't really be in favor of every single person in Gaza being killed or murdered in pursuit of potential or possible terrorists. And yet it became clear as those conversations unfolded that some people were in favor of that, even if they weren't immediately prepared to say it out loud. Some members, of course, of Netanyahu's government came pretty close, if not saying it entirely. Most obviously, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the national security minister, and Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, who have threatened to leave the government if Netanyahu agrees to a ceasefire, agrees to stop the killing. Even the BBC today has, and I don't mean even the BBC because it has been slow on this or hasn't done good reporting, but I mean even the BBC has managed to get this report out despite the fact that Israel works so hard to keep journalists out of the Gaza Strip. But they have a report today about mass graves and body bags being found at Al-Shifa hospital after Israel withdrew its forces. During the past 8 months of war, they write, hospitals have come under repeated attack, with Israel claiming that they're used as bases by Hamas. But I saw something amazing recently, which hadn't even entered into the discourse in this country. If the IRA, in their pomp, had been using hospitals in Northern Ireland as bases, or even if the British government claimed that they were, would we all have sat by comfortably while the British government bombed hospitals in Belfast? I don't think we would have done, would we? Oh, no, don't worry. It's used by Hamas as well. Oh, sorry, it's used by the IRA as well. So this sense that there were two sides to the argument, I think, left the building some time ago. I couldn't tell you when, either on a calendar or on that ticking toll of 36,470 dead Palestinians, and how many of them are children. It's usually about a third, isn't it, or thereabouts. Over 10,000 dead children. How many was too many? Because, of course, for people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, there's still not enough dead. There's still not enough dead. But Biden's comments are interesting, because I don't think anybody could really argue with it. And that should be a game-changing moment. If even Israel's doubtiest ally, Joe Biden, the United States of America, is describing the continuing killing of innocent Palestinians as entirely a consequence of Benjamin Netanyahu's own purposes, in other words, clinging on to power, keeping his own administration in place, then what the hell happens next? What actually happens next? So Biden is reaching, and there's an election on the horizon which may be pertinent to the question I'm about to ask you. But Biden is reaching the point where his patience appears to be exhausted, right? I don't know how much, and probably you don't either, how much of Israel's military capabilities are defined by American support, by American military ordinance. But if they have run out entirely of allies, how does it end? I've also seen reports that there's absolutely no prospect whatsoever of Israel agreeing to this. And even if they did agree to it sort of publicly, then there's no way in private that the cabinet could stay together without continuing the killing in Gaza. The main leaders of Hamas, of course, remain at large. They can't agree a ceasefire until all hostages are released. On Friday, he claimed that the threat from Hamas had been degraded to the point where the group could not stage another attack like that of October the 7th. So that, according to Biden, that claim has gone. And I don't know what's left now. So 12 minutes after 12 is the time. If, as seems likely, indeed if it hasn't already happened, if Israel now stands entirely alone on the world stage, and the use of the word genocide has now gathered pace, and it has ended up in places where it hadn't been before. I'll give you a little more detail on that later. Certainly the use of the phrase ethnic cleansing seems to me to be entirely pertinent. But if Israel is now entirely alone on the world stage, how does it end? 0345 6060973. If it's more than a fig leaf, isn't it? If the platform, if the scaffolding of international support, and I was surprised by how lonely the United States of America and the United Kingdom were on the world stage with regard to this issue, how quickly we began to look lonely. But if Israel has acted, if Benjamin Netanyahu has acted in such a way that even his doubtiest historical ally has been disgusted to the point of disassociation, you have now Biden saying the only reason the war is continuing is for Netanyahu's own purposes. Saying asked whether he thought that was happening, he replied, there is every reason for people to draw that conclusion. Is Benjamin Netanyahu prolonging the war for his own political reasons? There is every reason for people to draw that conclusion. So that's it. The game is up. For many of us, it was up a long time ago, but Joe Biden's continuing support for Benjamin Netanyahu made it impossible to see it in completely black and white terms. I think that impossibility has gone. I think it's left the building. And I would like you to tell me what that means.